Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM. This year marks 200 years since the birth of the passenger carrying railway here in the UK, and to celebrate this momentous occasion, all over the country there are special events and activities going on under the banner of Rail 200. One of these, organised by the official Rail 200 group, are Rail Stories, a collection of personal experiences and tales from normal people about how the railway has affected their lives. And they got in contact with me and said, "Hey Lawrie, do you have a tale that you'd like to tell and be part of this collection?" To which I went yes. And what I want to talk about is how the railway brings us all together, not just in a literal sense, but on a global scale. You see, my brother is a much greater explorer than I am, and has travelled all over the world and has lived in various parts of it. He currently resides in Canada, but before that he lived in New Zealand. And as I'd always wanted to go to New Zealand, this was the perfect opportunity for me to go on an adventure, meet up with him and see some of this country. And of course, as a rail enthusiast, whenever I go to a new country, I want to go and see some of the railways. I was very lucky because he was on the South Island between the towns of Blenheim and Picton, and on select dates throughout the year there is a mainline regular steam service that operates, and so I got to go and see this train running through, a greatly different machine to what we have in the UK. Firstly, it's running on Cape gauge but has a loading gauge similar to what we have in the UK, so to me it looks like a proper sized locomotive running on the narrow gauge, and the scenery was absolutely breathtaking, and it was something so different for me to be able to capture a steam locomotive running through this strikingly different landscape to what I'm used to. Now this goes back to way before I was doing YouTube and before I was really doing much video at all. In fact, most of my work was doing photography, which I was sending off and regularly getting published in the magazines. So my main ambition on this trip was to get some nice photos rather than to get some nice video. However, that's not the main point of this video. As wonderful as it was, and I have all these lovely photos of keepsakes of the adventure, that's not the point of this. Whilst I was there were several other railways that I wanted to go visit. One of them was the Blenheim Riverside Railway, which is the only 2-foot gauge railway in the South Island. So as it was local, I checked and saw that one day they were operating a special service. So I dropped them an email and said, "Hello, I'm from England, I'd like to come and take some photos of the railway. I see you're operating on this day, is it okay if I come along and go lineside?" And they came back and said, "No." Which admittedly was a bit of a surprise. It turns out that this particular trip was organised for adults with learning disabilities, and the railway wasn't sure that the group had organised it would be happy with somebody coming along and taking photos. And so I was obviously a little bit disappointed. However, the railway said, "Well, would you like to come for a ride anyway if you're in the area?" So I said, sure, I'd planned to come to the railway on this day, so I might as well go for a trip. And it's a lovely little railway that follows the river and runs into the heart of the town. Whilst I was there, I chatted to several of the volunteers who went, "You're from England? Why are you here?" And explained and said that I was a little disappointed because I'd wanted to come along and take photos of the railway. And they said, "Well, once we finish this, we have to take the locomotive and the train back to our main shed. Do you want to come with us? And then you can, take some photos as you go and have your own kind of photo charter and get the pictures." And I went, "Well, that sounds amazing." So I got my own private photo charter. I was able to go along and say, "Oh, let's stop here, I'll get a photo." And they would stop, reverse the train, drive past, and I went, "Oh, actually, I'll get some pictures here." And it was fantastic. These guys didn't have to do that. This was above and beyond. But we were brought together by our love for the railways and the fact that despite living on the other side of the world in different hemispheres, we're all rail enthusiasts, and they understood that passion and that enjoyment and wanted to see the railway shown off. It was absolutely fantastic. What's more than that, we then got to the shed where I got taken around and shown the other locomotives they have, including their steam engine, and I got to meet up with a chap who shares the same name as me. Not just my first name, but my first and second name. So that was really weird to be both rail enthusiasts, different hemispheres, but the same name involved in Heritage Railways, and that was proper cool. And it was lovely because all of these chaps, we just got on and talked like we'd known each other for years because we were brought together by Heritage and by Heritage Railways. That was an absolutely fantastic day, and I really enjoyed it and would love to go back one day and see the steam engine running. Now, most of you would think, oh, this is a good example of people coming together and sharing the joy of railways, and I would wholeheartedly agree. However, this wasn't the greatest part of my trip. One of the other places I wanted to go was a museum called Shanty Town. Now, this is a museum set up to New Zealand's gold mining craze. So just like the Wild West in America, there was a similar thing on the west coast in New Zealand to a lesser degree, and the museum at Shanty Town is a recreation of what one of these frontierish towns would be, searching for gold. And as part of this, they have some steam engines and they operate every single day. It's constantly open and always running engines. And I had emailed and arranged to go along and meet one of the drivers, and I was going to be given a ride on the engine, which I was very excited for. So I headed off with my mum, who'd travelled with me, and my brother, and said, I'm going to go to the railway for a little bit, you guys go out and check out the waves and go surfing. I turned up to find that the gentleman who was meant to be on the engine had been called away for a medical emergency in his family, which meant that my contact wasn't there. So I took a couple of photos, chatted a bit to the driver, waited for the next train, which ran pretty much every hour. And after chatting to him for a bit and explaining what had happened, it was like, oh, well, do you want to come for a ride on the footplate then, if that's what you arranged? I went, oh yeah, I'd love to go. So the next train, off we went with me on the footplate. Natter, 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 natter. I'm a driver in England, natter, natter, natter. And he went, oh, do you just want to put that injector on? And I was like, sure. Put the injector on, put some water into the boiler. And I went, huh, do you want to do some firing? So for the rest of the day, I became the fireman on the railway. And that was absolutely glorious. The only slight problem with this was for my mother and for my brother, who I'd said I'd be a few hours, I was now not leaving until the end of the day because I was now the fireman. This was incredible. I was on the footplate actually crewing an engine on the other side of the world. Obviously I knew what I was doing, as I'm a driver and I've been doing this for, well, I think 18 years now. So to be on the engine and be able to just grab a shovel, get on with it, was hugely rewarding. The line wasn't very long. It cuts through some dense rainforest, which means that photographic opportunities were rather limited. But being able to be on the engine and actually cruise something was absolutely phenomenal. And again, it comes down to this fact that because we're in this hobby, because we love the railways and because we love heritage railways, I was just able to get on with it, and we had such a good day chatting about railways, the differences between the railways in New Zealand and what I have back home, the fact the locomotive that I was on was actually a British-built machine to start off with. It was glorious and just absolutely unreal to think that you can go somewhere, chat to people, and something like this happens. People that had no other reason to come together, no other reason to actually chat to each other, brought together by the railways and end up working together and crewing an engine for a day. It was phenomenally good fun. Also rather hot, but what an amazing thing to do to be on this thing and actually to get to go with it. And having got through the day and taken it away and disposed it, I eventually went and found my family who didn't share my enthusiasm for spending the day on the footplate, and we carried on looking around New Zealand. The third adventure that I had was I went down to Christchurch to see the Ferrymead Heritage Railway, which is part of the heritage park they've got there. This was a long old drive down the One Road, which runs down the east coast of the South Island. This road had taken heavy damage during the earthquakes a few years earlier and wasn't yet fully open, to such an extent that in fact some of it was still single carriageway and some of it had been stopped full stop. And one of these stops, the gentleman who had stopped the traffic came up to speak to each car in turn and explained that the reason that we were being held was whilst helicopters flew in new girders for a bit of construction up ahead. We were delayed for about half an hour and then continued on with our journey, and I arrived in Christchurch to go visit this absolutely amazing park. They have something that I'd not actually seen in Heritage before, and they have an electric overhead on their Heritage railway so they can run electric stock. And again, they were running steam engines with another British-built machine, which was cracking to see. And I really loved the freedom of being able to go around and take various photos of the engine throughout the day. Again, I started speaking to the guys there who were amazed that a chap from Britain had come all the way to see their little railway, and I was offered a footplate ride and got to travel up and down the line, which again made my trip. It was absolutely magnificent. And then I got to tour around the sheds and shown lots of other bits and bobs, shown how the signal box works, and had an amazing time. The gentleman who I'd emailed was the signalman for the day, and so we had a really good chat and got on very well. It was amazing again to have forged this relationship based purely on the fact that we both enjoyed the railways and we were both at this heritage line. A big problem soon reared its ugly head, and that was that because the One was still being rebuilt, it was closed overnight. And in order for me to get to the point of closure before it shut, I was going to have to leave before the day ended, and as the weather had come out glorious, I was loath to do so, and was chatting to my new friend Kevin in the signal box about my predicament. And he said, well, the easiest thing to do is you stay here, we'll go get some dinner, and you can stay over at mine and head home in the morning. And I went, well, this sounds much better, because if I missed the road closure, it would be better for me to park up, sleep in the car, and then drive again than to try and go on the diversion. Yes, I know, isn't that ridiculous? The fact that it would take longer to do the diversion than sit and wait for the road to reopen. Mental. But again, this gentleman didn't know me from Adam. I wasn't doing YouTube, I wasn't known. It was just friendship to another railway enthusiast who was there, who was having a good time. So we went out after, got some dinner, had a lovely chat, and then in the morning I headed home via a play place where there was a Ruston 48 set up. So I got to have a good clamber over that and see a Ruston that had made it to the Southern Hemisphere. These 3 adventures that I had show just how amazing the community is and how we're all joined by our volunteering and being part of the Heritage Rail scene. Realistically, all 3 of these things shouldn't have happened, but it shows that wonderful connection that people recognise that you are similarly a volunteer. You understand you're part of that same group and how it opens doors, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether it's America, Canada, New Zealand, Germany, France, wherever. You say that you're a Heritage Railway enthusiast, that you're involved in the Heritage Railway, and doors open. People are more than willing to take you around and show you the shed and show you a little bit of their world as you tell them stories from yours. It's an absolutely incredible thing to be part of, and something that I am personally so proud of. It made my trip to New Zealand. The stunning scenery, seeing my brother and having my family together again. But going and being able to get that little bit extra, to be shown around those Heritage Railways, to be appreciated as a volunteer and as a guest, and to be shown and feel the sense of pride of these guys showing off their local railways was absolutely phenomenal. And it made it special. It made the whole trip incredible, and it's something that really makes me want to go back to New Zealand, because I want to go back and see those railways again. We as volunteers are part of a big family. The railway brings us all together, and that is absolutely glorious. And one of the strongest things about the railway is it's a family. Whether it's the big railway or Heritage, it's all one big family, and being part of it in one way or another is incredible. And even that works to a degree when you talk to drivers on the main line. You say, oh, I'm a driver on the Heritage Railways. Even though they're the big brother in the family, there's still that connection, and you appreciate what each other do. Being part of Heritage Railways is one of the best things that I have ever done with my life. And if you're thinking about volunteering, I can only recommend it and say, go for it. It will be one of the best things you've ever done. You never know what doors it's going to open, and who knows, if you're visiting another country and you happen to mention that you're a volunteer at the Heritage Railway where you come from, you never know what doors it will open. And it is such a rewarding feeling knowing that you're part of this worldwide community. It's not just limited to the UK or wherever, you're part of a worldwide movement. And that is truly, truly special, and I couldn't be more proud of it. And so that's my little adventure that I had several years ago in New Zealand. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about them and seeing some of the photos from my adventure. And of course, a massive great thank you to the Blenheim Riverside Railway, to the Shanty Town Museum, and to the guys over at the Ferrymead Railway. You guys made my trip. It was absolutely incredible, and there's links in the video description should you want to go and check it out for yourself, because they're worth going if you're over there, or if you are part of the New Zealand guys and you haven't gone already, I highly recommend it. So with that, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have, how about clicking somewhere over there for some other adventures, talking about stuff that I enjoyed or some of my other railway adventures. So with that, check out the other stuff that's happening for Rail 200, and there's a big thing that's going to be coming that I'll be able to announce soon, which is very, very exciting indeed. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Ta-da!